rest of the good news about that to Councillor Epp for her meeting. So, can I have a motion please to approve the agenda for planning?
So moved.
Moved by Mayor Rand, seconded by Councillor Little. Call to question. Those in favour?
Aye.
And we have the disembodied aye again. Motion passes. Public participation.
Sorry. Johnny Carline, 151 Cliff Drive, and I'm here just to thank the 3 members of council who did perform on the weekend. I was originally going to thank you for being good sports, but that implies that you weren't very good at what you did. And in fact, you were very good. You were musically surprisingly good. But more importantly, you captured the spirit of the event really perfectly. You came together and risked whatever you risked going up on stage, and well, we risked it too. I mean, you know, one politician on the stage with the microphone's already a risk. 3 of you. I mean, you know, but you all behaved brilliantly, and it was so fine, and I got so much good feedback, and everybody was really pleased. And yeah, hopefully next time there'll be a quintet. It'll be great. But thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Johnny.
Hi, good evening. Rachel French de Mejia, Olympic View Drive. I'm here tonight seeking an update on the 2nd anniversary of the report of the bylaw infractions on Annie Jackson Drive, specifically the permanent stairs and platform that were drilled into the Rocky Provincial Foreshore in the Environmentally Protected Covenant, a covenant that the district put in place as a trade-off between the developer's needs and protection of a sensitive ecosystem, while removing any hope of connecting a trail for the public to Tower Point from Blaney Trail. The covenant states that the property owners in the Tower Point estates cannot build anything remotely permanent along the protected waterfront areas, yet the 2-year-old structure remains there. I'm pretty sure that what I'm going to hear tonight is that it's a legal matter and that nothing can be publicly discussed. After 2 years of no news, you know, this is getting sort of hard to take. Now, as to possible outcomes, I see a win-win for Metchosin citizens. One scenario is that council sets a stellar example of their commitment to bylaw enforcement, and the stairs are removed by the owners or the district, who then bills the owners. This is standard practice in municipalities where these things occur, and would send a clear message here in Metchosin that bylaws have meaning. Alternatively, council does nothing and hopes the problem fades away. The reason this bylaw infraction process is win-win is if nothing is done, many residents are going to be very happy because it'll give us a clear message that we can do whatever we want on our properties without having the cost and inconvenience of paying for permits, and is consistent with the ongoing tradition of no meaningful consequences for soil dumping, tree cutting, industrial activity in residential zones, and illegal dwellings, etc. If the stairs get to stay, my husband is chomping at the bit and can't wait to add a few shipping containers to our field so that our children, in the spirit of tiny homes, can have cabins in which to visit. Oh, oops, did I say that out loud? Or what I mean is so we can have additional office and studio space while adding to the value of our neighbors' properties with the addition of such an eyesore. It would be a relief to know we need no longer pay attention to the bylaws in the district. If the district is not going to take seriously infractions in an environmentally protected covenant, the possibilities of what we can do on our properties are endless. Phew, hey? So with these scenarios in mind, meaningful bylaw enforcement or Wild West of Metchosin, I'm wondering which it's going to be with regards to this one. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rachel.
Explain where we are with it.
I can,
Court date pending.
and that's permissible.
Yeah.
Okay. So, sort of, yes, your answer is going to be somewhat expected, but my understanding is that there is a court date pending, so that's all I can say at this time.
Good evening. I actually have copies here. I don't know who the minute taker is, but that might help.
Okay, thank you.
So Nicole Shukin, Le Bon Road resident, good evening. And I also just want to thank you for the Ukraine fundraiser event. I only caught the tail end, so I didn't hear the trio, but I did hear Councillor Epp playing ukulele, and it was awesome. So thank you for that. I actually tonight want to share some key findings from a Freedom of Information or FOI request that residents obtained on the buffer land following the discovery in 2021 that some members of our district and council had been privately negotiating its sale to the CRD. The findings are relevant to the role and responsibility of the planning chair and committee. They reveal that Metchosin residents were only an inch away from having several large public lands, which came to us through the 2017 land swap, sold out from under without any public consultation or consent. And while passionate petitions from hundreds of residents averted the fire sale, FOI materials show that these lands may not yet be free of risk. So the FOI records reveal that, firstly, the 112-acre buffer land was just the first of 3 land parcels included in the final sales agreement with the CRD. Written into the sales contract is our district's intention to subsequently sell 2 additional parcels, sections 95 and 28. These 2 parcels were promised to Metchosin through the 2017 reconciliation agreement, or land swap, and they amount to 150 acres in addition to the 112-acre buffer. So we're talking about more than 250 acres of public land. As most folks know, these 2 sections haven't even come to Metchosin yet. They are to be transferred and protected as parkland upon completion of Chianu's treaty process. So this all is written into the 2017 reconciliation agreement, signed by Metchosin, Langford, and Chianu in 2017. These aren't just any old lands. The buffer land was integral to the referendum question that residents voted on in 2017. And the other 2 sections are vital public assets bound up with a land swap in which Metchosin gave over 350 acres of its land to Langford for development, adjusted our municipal boundary, and committed to a historic reconciliation agreement with Chianu. Now, some residents may believe that the buffer land was zoned as parkland following the land swap, but it wasn't. It was and currently still is zoned commercial recreational. This means that the district doesn't require electoral approval to sell it under the Local Government Act. It also means that the explanation our district has given for being ready to sell 112 acres for a piddly $274,000 is bogus. This amount of land zoned commercial residential would fetch several million. And View Royal, which recently sold less than 30 acres to the CRD for park purposes, received nearly $1 million. Now, it's hard to believe that it's even legal for lands included in the formal reconciliation agreement to be then included in a different sales agreement with the CRD. But whether or not it's legal, it certainly isn't ethical. FOI records show that the mayor and CAO were negotiating with the CRD for at least a year about the sale of these lands. There is no indication in the records, however, of when or whether other council members were informed over this time. FOI records also reveal how deeply Langford developer interests appear to be at play. In 2018, a Langford planner emailed Metchosin's planner to ask if the buffer land could serve as the green space requirement for Center Mountain Estates, the residential development which Langford got out of the land swap. Adding insult to injury, the buffer land that was meant to shield Metchosin residents in the Neild Road area from the worst impacts of development in Langford was being proposed to serve as those developers' green space requirement. So let me just read one line from the email from the Langford planner to our planner. Quote, "If the land is to be dedicated as park, it would satisfy to us that they, the developers, have met their requirements." Now, there's no indication in the FOI records of how our district responded, no signs of the strong rebuttal that we would hope and expect to find. In view of this 2018 email, it's interesting that in 2020, Mayor Rands and our CAO began privately negotiating with the CRD on a sale which would effectively dedicate the land as park. Tonight, I urge the planning chair and committee to make things right by taking 3 actions. Firstly, ask staff to inform you of the district's response to Langford's query about the buffer serving as the developer's green space requirement. Councillor Kahakawila, as planning chair, you should know what it was. Secondly, commit to a firm date for engaging the public on the future of the bufferland. Again, Councillor Kahakawila, when the notice of disposition for the sale of the buffer was discovered by residents 8 months ago, you publicly assured residents that it was just the start of a process. So when will this process begin? And thirdly, I urge Council to pass a resolution committing Council to honor those sections of the 2017 Reconciliation Agreement that pertain to the bufferland and sections 95 and 28. Please don't dodge this responsibility by saying you don't want to bind a future council to such a resolution. Resolve to restore the public's belief that referendum votes, land swaps, and reconciliation agreements mean something. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Just a couple of quick comments. So I have similar questions to you as to what the response would have been from our staff at that time. I was at the APRM's AGM last week and it was brought up. I am coming in tomorrow to talk with our new planner and our CAO in regards to this and a couple of other items as well. When I said to you back, if it was 8 months ago, I'll believe you, that this was the beginning of the process, it was. It was the start of the public process, and at that time, Council received information from the public, very strong information, very strong indication that they did not want us to sell the lands to the CRD, and we didn't. So there is still more ongoing public consultation that needs to happen, which we've committed to. It has stalled a little bit, and I apologize for that, but we'll get it back on track. As far as binding another council, we can't. So even if we pass a resolution, it doesn't bind another council. But I'll take this information back and I'll have a discussion with the planner tomorrow. Thank you. Anyone else for planning tonight?
Bev Bacon, a chosen resident. I'd like to talk about 4696 Beckingham Road. I've already talked at the Finance and Environment meeting, but this covers all the committees and everybody. I have one concern is that most of the public of Machosen probably doesn't know that this is coming up right now, that 100 acres in the middle of Machosen that's key for habitat and connectivity is poised to be cut up. And I think what I heard was that you had to notify people when you're so far down the road that you have to notify people within, was it 60 meters?
If we're going to move forward with an amenity zoning.
Yeah.
The process regarding the subdivision of the property could happen separately without council because it'll happen through the approving officer process because the land is already zoned for 5-acre lots. So that would be a completely separate process. But the reason why it's come to council in the first place is because the property owner is looking at doing an amenity rezoning.
And I applaud that completely, but I think when you get to the point that you're going to notify the public, which I would hope would be sooner rather than later, I think more than people within 60 meters are affected. So just to be brief, because it's the same faces sitting at the table no matter what the committee is, and you've memorized what I have to say by now, but I think it's exciting that we might get to do it right. We've got 100 acres, we don't have that many 100-acre patches left, and some of the ones that have been developed, we didn't get anything from it. So I totally appreciate that this developer is wanting to cooperate and wanting to do it right, and I urge you not to take it too far before or wait until you get a report back from MEASC saying what would be important and how would a sensitive development look. And I hope that you've got it referred to PTASC, because I think it would be a boon for Machosen to have a trail through to the Galloping Goose, and that would connect. It's just a short hop over to Machosen Park, known as 100-acre woods, kangaroo, eels, Arden, and you're there. And so there's some sweet things that could happen from that. I've driven around, I've looked at the properties, I've interviewed neighbors, past and present, people that I knew, and got all the information that I can. And I think it's imperative that we don't allow this, whether it's 5 acres or 2 acres, that you can't put another 20 people on, or 20 houses on wells there. We've tapped out Aquifer 606. There has to be piped water. And of course, if there's 20 lots and everybody's allowed to have a secondary home, there could be 40 families there. You can't do that. So, and for the developer to plead poverty on that, I think if he takes another look at the numbers, what I understand is he bought the property in October for $4 million. And if he did get 20 lots, he's not going to get anything less than $1 million a lot. So there's $20 million there. And he'll have some expenses, yes. But I think piped water is one of the expenses. So we could turn something into a plus for the other people living down Kangaroo Road.
Well, and I think if, as you heard from the last time that the applicant presented to council, that it was very clear that this council is interested in having part of this amenity look at bringing in piped water. So that was definitely an indication that we gave to the developer. I spoke with the planner afterwards the next day, and that information was relayed to the developer. I had their representative contact me, and I again relayed it to him that piped water is going to be key to whatever it is that he's looking at doing there. So we'll see how it progresses.
Thank you. And I did pass a note about the road. I don't know if you've looked into the road at all. Sherry, if you had a chance to.
I did send it to Joe Martinego, and he said they are aware of the things you brought up.
The poor sight line, and it's not wide enough, and the culvert's rotten. So anyhow, I think there's more things that we can ask for, and we can wait to get MEASC and PTASC on board. But my initial feeling is, wow, here's 100 acres that we could do right.
Yep, agreed.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pam.
Kathy Saluk, Neff Road. I just want to respond further to what Nicole had brought up. The revelations through the FOI requests of the district's own documents have disclosed something very disturbing information to the public. The once touted historic cooperative land swap between 3 jurisdictions, a partnership with the politically correct title of Reconciliation Agreement, is now beginning to look a lot more like a land giveaway than a land swap. As details emerge about proposals for Langford developers to use the dedicated buffer lands as their own park space, and the negotiations to offer parcels for sale to the CRD, all without full council discussion or public input, or a slap in the face of Metchosin residents. Disregard for transparency, for timely and appropriate communication with all members of council, or even basic democratic values are definite indicators of a process in trouble. The fact that the mayor and CAO have acted unilaterally, independent of council direction, and beyond the scope of the signed agreement is extremely troubling. These are serious transgressions and need to stop. I would urge all members of council who are not privy to these actions to demand a full accounting of the mayor's and the CAO's behavior. I would also encourage them to insist on up-to-date information involving what other plans Key Corp and CRD may have with regards to Metchosin's public lands, and to adopt a written resolution so that no lands will be disposed of before there has been thorough council debate, an open public consultation process, and social and environmental impact assessments have been undertaken. You owe that to us.
Rand, you wanted to comment?
I've got a question. I mean, preceded with a statement, and that is that decisions at council are made in camera with the full information supplied, and that this is not some nefarious thing between the CAO and myself. It's always been done with the full understanding from council, who understood the issue. My question is, and I suppose it goes to Nicole too, do you support the idea of working with Beecher Bay, Chianu, in order to achieve an indigenous protected area at Rocky Point, at Mary Hill? Do you support that concept?
I would never answer that question without explaining its relationship to the FOI findings.
Well, unfortunately, right now, I can't. I have already spoken to the Mary Hill Steering Committee about releasing the full information, but I mean, it's good public knowledge that we are trying to work with Chiano in order to achieve the Indigenous protected area, and I'm just asking, in principle, do you support that?
But that hasn't got anything to do with what we just brought up.
Well, that's,
What you don't understand, Mayor Rand, excuse me, I want to interrupt for just a minute, please, is that we, you know, in this community, we all talk to one another. We run into each other, we meet counselors, we share information. That's what we do as a caring community. The stuff that you and Lisa did regarding all this stuff is apart from Maryhill, and it was wrong.
well, again, I
Mayor
completely
Ransom,
disagree, and I think the events will show who's correct on this. Cherry picking things out of a FOI report is not a very positive way of trying to determine what has transpired over the several years.
Well, maybe the
So-
counselors could let us know if they actually knew about some of that
So
stuff.
I'm going to shut this down for the time being, just because we have a lot of other work to do. You're more than welcome to snicker, it's fine. It's not gonna hurt my feelings. There is a lot of things that happen behind closed doors that we can't always bring forward to the public as soon as we'd like. And I've commented actually recently in regards to the potential sale of that piece of land to the CRD. I think there's things that we definitely could have done better in regards to bringing information out sooner, or maybe just more with more context. What we did was legally correct, but I think we probably could have done things maybe a little bit better, a little bit more softer in the approach to getting the information out there. So, you know, we did cut off the sale. We stopped the process, and we have committed to doing a consultation process for those pieces of land, which will happen. And so at this point, I appreciate the information you received from the FOI. The mayor is correct. FOIs don't always provide the entire picture. It provides a snapshot, and there's always more information. So at this point in time, I'm going to limit this discussion now back to anybody else who has any other public participation matters.
So we're not going to open it up to other councillors since the mayor was allowed to speak. Other councillors are not allowed to speak at this point?
Sure, why not?
Well, I just would like to publicly state that I didn't know about any of this until the agreement was brought forward to an in-camera meeting in September. Unfortunately, I wasn't at that meeting because the in-camera meeting was moved from the Monday night to the Friday when I was on board a ferry escorting my sister back from surgery. Council knew about that, so I didn't find out about it until the next meeting. So, and I had no prior knowledge that the buffer lands were ever going to be sold or connection to any of that, and I think it's important to state that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Little. Councillor Epp, Councillor McKinnon? Any comments?
Nothing to add right now, no.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McKinnon.
Not at this time.
Thank you, Councillor Epp. And at this time, I have nothing further to add either. So is there any other public participation for planning?
If I could speak to this. Selby Saluk. I'd like to read a letter from Steve Gray, 4397 Machosen Road. Dear Mayor Rands and Council, Bufferlands. Late last week, I received a link to the machosenbufferlands.com website. The site is quite amazing and the information revealing. Following up my comments at an earlier council meeting on the buffer land, and in keeping with comments made by council that evening, I join others now to urge you to 1. Place a formal moratorium until October 15th, 2022 on any transactions to do with the buffer lands, and or 2. Begin the public consultation process on the buffer lands by scheduling a public information meeting to be held next month. Thank you for your consideration of this request. Sincerely yours, Steve Gray.
Thank you, Selby. Any other public participation for planning tonight? Nope, okay. So moving on, we have the special planning committee meeting minutes from May the 30th. Motion to adopt.
Move
Moved by
adoption.
Moved by Councillor Epps, seconded by
Seconded.
Councillor McKinnon. Any discussion? Called to question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. So this evening, what I thought we would have had public participation on is the draft bylaw enforcement policy. This was originally supposed to come to the meeting in May, which had to be postponed. I did provide the information as soon as I could. Once the meeting was canceled, I forwarded off the reports to the APRM President Jay Shukin. I haven't heard back from him, and I don't know if anybody else from council has heard from the APRM or not. But in front of us, we have the first draft is what you see is the changes that this committee has made to the policy. The second draft with the track changes is what I would like to probably focus most of our time on. These were, so this draft here on page 17 incorporates the comments by Bev Bacon. Where did she go? There she is. By Bev Bacon, as well as the letter from the APRM, which had some very good suggestions. So to start off the process, as I said, I'm going to suggest that we go through the track changes to either incorporate those changes, make other suggestions, and then we can look at the overall document and provide a recommendation. Does that sound workable to committee? Yep, okay. Don't think they were printed. Normally, Bev, I would give you mine, but I need it. Okay, so if we go to page 17, the first comment on the bottom was a comment from Bev that she didn't agree with the statement. So I'm not sure if there's anything that we want to change there or incorporate. But if there's nothing further for those two comments, we can move on. I know the writing's small. Welcome to Word. Okay, so we'll move past that. Next is on page 19. So this is in...
Councillor Tahakawala.
Yes.
I don't think we need to change the text, but I just like to acknowledge Bev's input here because it's something that I was part of a discussion on as well. That although that it's true as written, we could decide to allocate our resources differently, for example, and hire and move to some other model of bylaw enforcement. I don't think the comment necessitates changing the existing bylaw, but it's a good point that makes.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's one that I know every council has had a discussion at some point when they're looking at bylaw enforcement. Do we stay with the current process of bylaw complaint-driven, or if we look at other sources and what that would look like? And that usually comes around budgeting time. So I'm going to guess the next council will have that as a discussion point coming up in the fall. Okay, so on page 19, up at the top, there's a couple of comments here. One in particular from the APRM where it says to include shall not be and preface before disclosed. I do feel that we should incorporate that change. So if the rest of committee agrees with that, we can agree that that is a change that we'd like to see brought forward. Okay, I'm seeing a couple of nods.
Yep.
Yep, okay, good. So we'll make that note.
Which change are we doing?
This is the second comment where it says the APRM letter dated January 10th, bold the words shall not be to confirm the direction of the section. So the actual wording is the complainant's name and any particulars of the complaint which may reveal the identity of the complainant shall not be disclosed to the alleged violator. And of course, there's a caveat further down where it says the anonymity and confidentiality afforded the complainants. I think it's a good one to include just for the complainant's peace of mind. Again, small print.
Yes.
Now, that being said, there is item 2C where it does explicitly say the anonymity and confidentiality afforded complainants and alleged violators by this policy cannot be assured if the investigation results in court proceedings, being that an identifiable complainant is required for evidentiary purposes. So if it does move forward, the complainant no longer has the ability to remain confidential if we're going to use their statement or their evidence. However, every effort will be made to keep it as confidential as possible. So, next one, on page 20, we've got the APRM letter dated January 10th, suggestion to reference the best practices in relationship to investigations of complaints. So this would be, as the district has limited financial and personal resources, I think the wording would then go in to be best practices. Somehow we would include the term best practices in there, if that's what, or no. Am I seeing this incorrectly? Investigations and informed financial contributions. I'm not sure. Is there someone from the APRM that could maybe actually elaborate a little bit more on that? No? Okay. Committee, do we want to leave a reference to best practices? I'm assuming this is probably relating back to the ombudsperson's report.
Where is it going?
I'm not sure.
But is that not, sorry? Is that not referring to the best practices of the ombudsperson's report on bylaw enforcement?
It
Or
is, but I'm not sure how it would fit into the context here. So if council wishes, I can investigate that a little bit further before it comes back to council.
Yes.
Okay. And Bev, thank you again for your comment. And yes, allocating funds is one of those things that council gets to decide at certain times, and it is always a conversation. So the next item down is enforcement authority, where it says a suggestion to additional statement referencing section E. I think this is a good clarification, if the rest of council agrees.
Yep.
Okay, excellent. The next item again, and there's a staff note that it should be listed from the property owner should be amended to the alleged offender. But overall, are you in agreement that this goal statement in terms of the using voluntary compliance be included? Mayor Rands?
The suggestion that voluntary compliance should only be used when there is
Should not have reasonably known about the action.
when they hadn't reasonably known about the action, but that's very subjective, for one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, a person who judged the reasonability of that? And I think it also puts us in a bit of a box in so much as voluntary compliance can also be done part and parcel with fines and certain penalties that are being applied, and you can still have the voluntary compliance. So I think that again this needs to be reworded so that it doesn't preclude our ability to levy a fine but leave it at that rather than go into a long form prosecution, providing that after the penalty has been addressed that there will still be a voluntary compliance.
If I may, I do like the general concept of this, but if we took out the last sentence, so it would be voluntary compliance may be used when there is a potential to correct a bylaw violation quickly, effectively, and with minimal cost implications to the district. Voluntary compliance is best used when a property owner has inadvertently violated a bylaw and upon being made aware of the violation is willing to be able to quickly correct the situation. If we leave out the part where it says voluntary compliance may not be appropriate when a property owner should have reasonably known that the
Yes.
action is questionable, I think that would probably
I think that would solve it.
One, it clearly defines voluntary compliance, but it still leaves the door open, even if we have a scofflaw, but he gets caught, and he's willing to bring it into voluntary compliance,
Yeah.
therefore saving the district boatloads of money in regards to court
Yeah,
proceedings.
and
We have
running the
option.
risk of losing the action as well, which we've seen happen, so,
This is true.
yeah.
So, committee, are you okay if we include the 2 sentences and leaving out the third and final one? Got a head shake from Councillor Epp. Councillor McKinnon?
That works for me. The third sentence is essentially the flip side of the second sentence.
Correct.
The second sentence, you indicate it may be appropriate when they inadvertently done it, and the third sentence just says it would be inappropriate if they've deliberately done it.
Yep.
Right? Should reasonably have known. So I'm happy with it left out. It's duplicative to a certain extent.
Thank you. Councillor Little?
Yeah, I was just thinking that this is so wordy. You often get lost in all the verbiage about the main point. I think it can be, maybe staff can shore it up a bit and instead of maybe use sought when there is potential. It is our first line of, I don't want to say offense, but it's our first line of action because we lack capacity at the District of Machosen. It just seems a lot of this, there's a lot of words in this whole document that don't need to be here.
But voluntary compliance is an important feature of any municipality because it doesn't matter what municipality you go into, whether they have their own bylaw enforcement, whether they subcontract it out, whether they're urban, rural, large or small. Every councillor that I've ever talked to, I don't think there's a municipality in this province that has active bylaw enforcement and insofar as that they're not looking also for voluntary compliance because it is the first line of defense.
And that actually, in the workshops that we took with the, govlaw.com, Troy DeSouza's group, they did mention that was the first line of action or
Yep.
first point of contact.
Okay. Now the next comment here is in compliance timelines in situations where voluntary compliance has been granted, compliance actions are to be undertaken and verified as complete as soon as reasonably possible. I think that is implicit, but do we want to include that verbiage or leave it out?
Leave it out.
Okay, so we'll leave that section. Unless I hear otherwise, Councillor McKinnon?
It's okay.
So next page 21, again, we have more commentary from Bev, thank you again. With reference to the 6-month limitation, so I think this is probably a good thing to have in here, whether or not people actually read this policy or not. I'm hoping we can put it on the website. It might be a little bit of bedtime reading, but I think having that information that there is a time limit that council can bring action forward against a violator. So I don't think it can hurt to have it in here. It's implicit in the law anyway, so having it as another piece of information to the public is not a bad idea. Thoughts, committee?
I like it.
Okay, so we'll leave this in. We have another comment again from Bev, and then on page 24, just as a comment, it's not, the addition isn't needed because council appoints staff and staff can then delegate to CRD bylaw enforcement to be able to take the actions necessary. And so I think we don't need to add anything further here. That's agreeable by committee.
Apart from where it says including authorizing ticketing?
Well, that's we can do that, but the comment that staff has made there is that appointed staff have the authority to enforce bylaws. So the CAO delegates to CRD bylaw enforcement. They have the authority inherently to enforce our bylaws, which includes ticketing and other forms of action. So it's not necessarily needed. If you'd like to have it in there, I'm fine with it either way.
Sorry, I'm just going backwards to page 22, but there's a section on the 3rd paragraph where it says he or she. I think we should, to be politically correct, we should change it to they or them.
Oh, which on for the 2nd paragraph under prosecution?
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. That reminds me of Councillor Mitchell days, of Joe Mitchell. Okay, and then so going back to 24, are you wanting to including authorizing tickets because it is already implicit in the work that they do?
Doesn't hurt to leave it in.
Okay, we will leave it in. Done. Okay, so next, we can, what I would suggest, because we've been working on this for quite some time, is that the changes to be incorporated, it's being recorded, that we recommend, or that we ask staff to incorporate the changes made this evening to the draft policy, and we ask to have it brought back for consideration at an upcoming council meeting. So it would move it from the planning realm into an actual council meeting for final ratification.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Epp, seconded by Mayor Rands. Discussion.
Yes, is there an opportunity for committee members to have additional comments on the bylaw, the draft bylaw, before it goes back to staff?
Thank you very much, Councillor McKinnon. Yes, I was derelict in my duties. I should have asked for that earlier. So, Councillor Little had her hand up as well, so I'll come back to you in just a minute, Councillor McKinnon. Councillor Little.
No, I was also going to ask a similar question in terms of this is going to go forward now to council for ratifications. Will we see a final copy at that point, or just the first, second, and third readings?
Well, there's no readings because it's a policy, it's not a bylaw.
Okay.
So what'll happen is any changes that we make, including the ones that we've just done and any new ones that Councillor McKinnon or anybody else has, the direction to staff will be to incorporate those changes and to bring back that document. I'm going to suggest to Lisa that she do it in a way that we can track those changes, or like bold them so that we know what changes have been made. To bring that back to the next council meeting or the next feasible council meeting so that we can have that discussion at the time on what hopefully will be a finalized document. Obviously, at any point in time, we can make changes again and send it back to staff, but I think we've spent quite a bit of time on this. The lackluster kind of response tonight on it, I was really hoping that we'd get some more comments from the public on it, I think might indicate that there's a bit of fatigue and we should move forward on adopting a policy. So, Councillor McKinnon, what changes would you like to add?
Thank you, Councillor Kahakawila. I have one structural suggestion.
Okay.
I would appreciate getting the committee's feedback on, and then I have a few just small editorial suggestions.
Okay.
So the structural change, let's start off with this one. Oh yes, before I get into any of that, I wanted to thank Bev and the APRM for their valuable contributions. Very much appreciated, and Councillor Kahakawila, I very much appreciate the innovation of having those suggestions accompanying the draft document as track changes. I think that's a really clear way of letting the committee know, and also letting the people who had input to it know that we're taking their comments seriously. So thanks for doing that. Thanks, Bev and APRM. My structural change is under policy statement. Here I'm on page 8. At the end of policy statement, it says the municipality's process can generally be described as having 4 distinct components. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that made perfect sense to me. And the policy begins, so you go through the objectives, but then you get into B, section B on page 9, which is the first of these 4 distinct components: complaint communication process. So then section C is investigation, on page 11 is investigations and enforcement of potential contraventions. So I was wondering if section C on page 11 would just be investigation, which it basically is, and
actually is compliance proceedings. So are you suggesting that we change section D then, instead of saying enforcement authority, to compliance proceedings?
Yes, that's what I'm trying to suggest.
Okay.
And it really, section D, as it currently sits, is compliance proceedings.
Yes.
And then, for D1, and then by the time you get into D2, you're really into the fourth bullet there, enforcement proceedings. So I would put a new section in between the existing D1 and D2, and it would be section E, enforcement proceedings, and include the second half of existing page 12 and the top half of page 13.
Okay. I'll work with Lisa on that to sort of clean that up a little bit. Does that make sense? I know what you're trying to get to. So it's to make it structurally the same for what it is that we're listing off as our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 priorities, and then to mirror them into the actual policy document. Correct?
That is my suggestion.
Okay.
If it can be worked, it would tie those sections back to the policy statement at the beginning.
Okay. I know where you're going with it, so I'll speak with Lisa about that to bring that forward when we bring back the next draft.
And then my tiny little edits, and thank you for considering these here, because if this is coming back to council next time, I'd like to have as many of these suggestions in it as possible. I don't want to be editing these too much when it comes to council.
Fair.
On page 8, the same sentence more or less is repeated in the second paragraph of the policy statement, and also under background at the bottom, where it says, for example, in the second paragraph under policy statement, health, safety, environment, or liability concerns, and it says necessitates, and it should actually just say necessitate.
Maybe I'm missing it.
If you're under policy statement, second paragraph, second line, health,
Okay.
environment, or liability concerns, it should be necessitate,
Right.
not necessitates.
Okay, got it.
Okay? Same phrase and same mistake is on the very last line of page 8, where again necessitates should be necessitate.
Very bottom of the page.
Very last line on current page 8.
Yeah, sorry, I'm working on 17 because that's where we had our track changes. Give me 1 second.
Oh, sorry.
No, no, don't, it's totally fine. I was trying to keep all my changes in one spot.
Right?
Oh, I see. Okay. Got it. Wonder if it's not there for. You know what? Therefore, it is the policy of the district. Health, safety. It's actually not there. So in the track changes, it's actually, that last sentence is not there, is concerns. Okay, I'm going to ask Lisa about that, because in the track changes one, that it actually, it stops after liability concerns.
Yeah, okay, which is a concern of another sort.
Yeah, I'll just ask Lisa to go back through the document again. I'll go with it, I'll go over it with her. Okay, anything else?
Yes?
Okay.
So if you're working with track changes version then, I'll try and do it on that one. If you go to page 18,
Okay.
under objectives,
Mm-hmm.
I think there probably used to be 5 objectives and now there's 6 objectives. So after objective 4, it's got semicolon
Andy, with COVID, you've had way too much time on your hands.
COVID will do that to a person.
Oh, it will.
Yeah. So if you go to section D3, where is that here?
D3 is on page 21.
Page 21. Right. And 22. So let's go to 22.
Okay.
In your bullet list right at the very top, item 3, risk of public safety should be risk to public safety.
Okay.
Risk of public safety is a good thing. Risk to public safety is a bad thing.
Got it. Okay.
Then I think the only other one that I had in here was under section E1. Environmental impact has been added to the list, which is good, but it should be lowercase like the rest of the list.
Okay, got it. Okay.
That's all.
Oh, that's all? Okay then. Mayor Rance?
I'm just going to say my compliments to you, Councillor McKinnon.
Yeah.
Jeff Hadley would be proud on the first council.
Oh, okay. Well,
That's
and
what-
again, Councillor Mitchell and subsequently Councillor Milne would also be very proud of you, Councillor McKinnon. Okay, so we've got the changes. We have a motion on the floor. Is there any other discussion? And just to reiterate, the motion is to have staff incorporate the changes we've made this evening and bring back the document with a way to track the changes we've made, maybe a little easier than what the small print is, and to bring it back to the next council meeting at the earliest possibility. So, call the question on the motion. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you very much, council, or committee, for doing this, and my hat's off to Bev Bacon for the time that she's taken on this, and to the APRM for the comments that they put forward initially. It's, I think, a good collaborative process, and hopefully we'll have the finalized document at an upcoming council meeting where we can finally bring it into being. Okay, so moving on, we have correspondence from Steve Gray on page 37.
Move receipt.
Moved by receipt by Mayor Rand, seconded by Councillor Little. Call to question, or sorry, discussion.
Yeah. I was uncertain. I read the material from the LCRB on this, and it seemed as if it was mainly written, the material about municipalities is mainly written for example, if you have, say, our beer garden at Machosen Day, or you have some special event in say, Machosen Hall, other than for renting out a space in a property you own, which is what we're proposing to do here. Well, I wasn't 100% certain. It wasn't 100% clear to me that the sort of liability for the municipality implied in Steve's letter would necessarily apply to Machosen. Can someone enlighten me on the legalities around that? Steve raises some serious questions here. My read through it suggests that those liabilities wouldn't apply to us under that situation, but perhaps it's a good time to seek a little bit of legal advice on that.
I can see when I was working on this with our previous planner, we did talk about this, and it's not implied that we would have the liability. However, I was going to be asking our new planner just a sort of a fresh set of eyes just to make sure. And, you know, I can discuss this with Lisa, and if we do need to receive a legal opinion, that's fine. But my understanding, it is more for special events, special occasions. So the beer garden obviously would be one that we would have some liability for, but my understanding is it doesn't apply to this, but I agree with you, Councillor McKinnon, and I'd like to make sure.
If there is wording on their site that suggests, for example, if you run a recreation facility that has a standing bar, like say a curling rink with a lounge that serves alcohol all the time, that there may be some liability there. So it's not black and white in my mind, and if we could have as an action item that you would pursue this with our planner seeking a little bit of clarity, I'd feel better about the municipality's liability.
Spoken like a true finance chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I will bring this up, not a problem at all. Any other discussion? Call to question, those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. Next item is again for our receipt. It's the upcoming fees and charges changes to the West Shore Parks and Recreation, which will be, it's now all included in the budget.
I'll move receipt.
I'll second that, but I got a question.
Sure. Moved by Councillor McKinnon, second by Mayor Rounds. Question, Mayor Rounds?
I just noticed that some of them, some of the fees, like there's not a consistent elevation of the fees, and I'm just wondering if you could explain why some of them are higher than the
Higher
others.
than others?
Yeah.
It was done, so I asked staff about this previously. A lot of it is to keep in line with what other municipalities and other recreation facilities are doing. Some of our fees were actually lower than what they should have been in the first place, so that's why they've got a higher lift. Others were pretty on par, and then there were some that we just felt that, or staff and the board felt that there wasn't room for bringing them up any further. So that's the reason why there's a discrepancy between 0 and you know, most of them were sitting around 11%, but some of them did go higher than that. So yeah, that was the reason why.
Thanks.
Okay. Call to question, those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. That ends the business of the planning committee. Hold on, I need to